We're now recording.
Fantastic. Okay, so thank you, Lawrence, for the introduction. As Lawrence said, we've worked together a number of years. So my name's Gary Shepherd. Apparently now I'm the Strategic Director for Active Schools. So we change our titles a lot. And my role really is to oversee our children and young people team, of which in Northamptonshire at least, we have a fairly significant number of people who work in that team. There's 13. I've got 13 direct reports, which is larger than a lot of active partnerships, but we'll touch on some of that in a second. I'm going to try and share a presentation, and fingers crossed that will work. So I'm hoping that it will pop up on the screen. I can certainly see something happening on my screen at the moment. Ignore all of the writing. Can you see, what can you see? The slides, or can you see?
Primary PE and School Sport Conference 2022.
Well, that's good. It's the wrong presentation then, because it's not that one. Because clearly you're not the primary school PE presentation. So let me get.
It says 85 slides as well, which means I think you put a bit too much work in, Gary.
Yeah, no, it's this one. So let me share this one rather than that one, because I'm sure some of you looked and saw 85 slides and thought, oh my God, we're going to be here till midnight. You're really not. Right. Let's have a look. Is that more like it? That's more like it. Okay, so can people see now that says RLSS meeting? Fantastic. The only disadvantage of this now is I can't see anybody apart from Lawrence, and no disrespect, Lawrence, but I can't see anybody else. So if anybody else wishes to chip in at any point, I won't be able to see you. So perhaps, Lawrence, if you can see others, you might be able to do that for me. Yeah. So Lawrence has kindly asked me to come and talk to you about active partnerships, and I will do that as succinctly as possible. I've got about 15 or 16 slides. I won't speak to all of them. But really the idea is to introduce you to an active partnership. So obviously I'm from Northamptonshire Sport. We are one of an ever-changing number of active partnerships. Once upon a time there was about 50, and now it's about 43 as various partnerships merge. So for example, in London, if anybody is from London, the London partnerships, once upon a time there were 6 of them. There's now just one representing the whole of London. Whereas in Northamptonshire, we've always been representative of the Shire County of Northamptonshire. 7 local authorities, recently reduced the reorganisation to 2 unitary councils, but it's still the geographical footprint of Northamptonshire. So we'll touch on some of that in terms of what we do. And what we do, I guess it's like clubs probably across your sport and certainly across sports generally. No 2 clubs are the same. No 2 active partnerships are the same. They all have terms, operating procedures. They all have ambitions and mission statements and values and things that they set out to achieve, but they all do them with slightly different structures in slightly different ways. Much of which is around the hosting of those partnerships. So some are like Northamptonshire Sport, we're a charity. Some are based within their local authority, and some are based within education. And some are more commercial businesses set up with different terms of association. Before I come on to that video, I'm doing well with the PowerPoint presentation, as you can see. Just in terms of what an active partnership is, it's not. Oh yeah. Oh dear. Are you sure you're recording this, Lawrence? Can I start again? In terms of what an active partnership is, basically, it is a collection of organisations that work together to achieve various objectives, and in this case, it's around physical activity. So once upon a time, they were called active sports partnerships. Then they became known as county sports partnerships, and slowly as the agenda has changed to be less about sport and more about physical activity, they have become active partnerships. So you will see, depending on where you're from, you will see different names for the active partnership. So I'll give you some examples. So Northamptonshire Sport is us and what we do. I think somebody said they were from Somerset. Did you see how I slipped into a Somerset or an attempt at a Somerset accent there? Sorry. Somerset is Somerset Active Sports Partnership. So they're known as SASP. You've got places like LRS Sport, used to be called LRS Sport. They're now called Active Together. You've got things like Energize Me, which represent Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So they're, as I said earlier, they're all active partnerships, but they all have slightly different names, slightly different takes on things. They'll have different boards, different structures, but they're there to really address physical activity and the reduction in the number of people who are deemed to be physically active. Video, hopefully, will give you just a little bit of strategic context to where it's from. I can't hear any sound. Can you?
No.
Okay, so the sound's not working. It was working beautifully when I ran through it earlier. Okay, just watch it and I'll try and talk through. This is a Sport England video produced really to represent their new strategy, which is called Uniting the Movement. Lots of positive imagery about the different demographics and the people that Sport England are now tasking people like Northamptonshire Sport and national governing bodies to provide opportunities to engage in physical activities and to help them lead more healthy, active lifestyles. I would suggest you look at, you watch it on YouTube and you'll get the full sound effect. It is narrated by Kelly Holmes, and she basically talks us through what is happening. Okay, so apologies for lack of sound, but as you will have seen from the imageries there were lots of images of non-traditional, if you will, people engaging in physical activity and not just sport. So yes, there was pictures of sport, you know, there were people playing football, riding bikes, but there was a lot more around, you know, somebody going out for a run with a pushchair. People with disabilities engaging in climbing. So lots of different messages and images used to represent the agenda around the national picture and the work that active partnerships are now tasked to do. So the national picture is basically adult inactivity is increasing, as to is inactivity levels within children and young people. And certainly these two things have not been helped by the pandemic. Now, I'm sure you will have seen when the lockdown happened in the first instance in March 2020, there was a real boom in people going out, walking, cycling, being out with their children. Lots of people that you wouldn't necessarily have seen previously out and about doing things, because in part that was about the only thing you were allowed to go out and do. So lots of people took those opportunities. There were lots of people not working, being furloughed, or working from home and having a bit more time around, you know, not commuting to the office for 2 hours a day, and that freed up some time in their diary to go and do things. But overall, the pandemic has been negative for physical activity, has reduced physical activity levels, and inequalities have widened. So people that wouldn't ordinarily have been taking part in physical activity because of inequalities, there's more of them now who are not engaging in physical activity. So again, all these stats are available to you for your local area. So if you look in the bottom left corner, it says Source Active Life Survey, 16 plus, not including gardening. Latest data point, November 19 to November 20. So this is for Northamptonshire. And this shows you the levels of inactivity and activity.
Over the last year.
Oh, that was Kelly Holmes. So it shows you things like there are currently 174,000, so nearly 175,000 adults who are inactive. And that inactivity is deemed to be less than 30 minutes a week of moderately intensive physical activity. So that can include walking, cycling, doesn't include gardening, but some data sets do include gardening. So 175,000 people not doing 30 minutes of activity a week. And then you will, as you move through, you will see that there are nearly 350,000 adults who are active. And that means they're doing 150 plus minutes of activity a week. And then there's some comparisons there with national data. So again, as I say, you can go and find that information quickly through Google if you want to look what the picture is like in your area, but the national picture, that shows you how Northants compares to the national picture. Similarly for children, children are meant to do, children aged between 5 and 16 are meant to do 60 active minutes a day averaged out over the course of a week. And the general rule of thumb is that school is responsible for 30 of those minutes and home/community is responsible for the other 30 of those minutes. But it is averaged out over the course of the week. So you'll see again on the left, 33,000 children in Northamptonshire currently do less than 30 minutes a day. So that's PE lessons or not. That's time in the playground or not. That's things that they do in the community or not. And then there's 44,000, nearly 44,500 who are doing on average 60 plus minutes a day. And those figures have been falling and reducing, and it does fluctuate a little bit, but certainly the pandemic hasn't helped with participation rates. Okay. Sport England. So we had the slide Uniting the Movement. So Sport England decided to launch a new strategy that active partnerships are partly responsible for, but so too now are all of the organisations that Sport England fund. They're called system partners, and that would include people like national governing bodies, it would include the active partnerships, and it would include organisations like street games and Sporting Equals, who work around the inclusion of ethnic minorities in physical activity and sport. So they're all tasked now with working towards uniting the movement, and some of the things I'm just going to touch on now. So I'm going to go to them in a little bit more detail in a second, but there are 5 big issues as identified by Sport England in uniting the movement, and we are geared now around addressing those 5 areas. So I'll talk about how we're geared around addressing them in a second. So recover and reinvent. So obviously the pandemic had a fairly significant or a very significant impact on a large number of clubs. Depending on your club's situation, it could have been massively significant or it could have been manageable. So from my own personal background, I am the club secretary for a local football team. We've got 250 players. We own no assets. We pay no staff. Lockdown happened, and other than the fact that we couldn't get 250 kids out playing football every week, that was pretty much the impact. We did lose some volunteers who kind of wanted to carry on doing things but couldn't, and then enjoyed the fact they got some more free time back in the bank and didn't come back to us as a club. But actually, we had no bills to pay. We didn't generate income. We didn't have subscriptions coming in and weekly fees for training, but we didn't have any outgoing. So the impact of COVID for us financially was very limited, whereas some clubs would have gone out of business because they relied upon income generation. They had bills to pay, staff to pay, facilities to run, etc., etc. So this is really about how we as an active partnership work with clubs to come back from COVID, but not just to recover from it, but also to develop, to improve. I think the phrase is build back better. So how we might support a local club, having looked at what happened through the pandemic and say, well, is there anything you could change to future-proof you in the event of another pandemic or something else happening? So we have club support people who can work with clubs on that. I've just had a meeting this afternoon with a basketball club to talk about exactly that. How do we grow what they want to do? How can we support them to do those sorts of things? So they want to know how we can find them more volunteers. They want to know how we can pay for facilities, for example. Workforce is on there, so lots of active partnerships will have workforce development officers. They'll run CPD courses, safeguarding, how to use technology, fundraising, etc., etc. So there's a whole thing about workforce development. As Lawrence will well know, there's a huge piece of work that goes on around young leaders and trying to upskill young leaders and young people in schools so that they, A, develop employment skills, but also then can volunteer in local community settings and can support broader development of opportunities. Funding, and each active partnership will have funding streams that you can apply for. So all active partnerships have something called Tackling Inequalities Fund as a result of COVID. That's now called the Together Fund. There's a little bit more information on that in a second. So again, there are things that you can look on your local active partnerships website and find opportunities for funding. And everyone is slightly different, but they will have funding available should you meet the criteria of that funding. Similarly with courses, I've just mentioned CPD, but there's a lot of training and development opportunities through active partnerships. And then support platforms is a newish thing, but you know there are examples, and we did it where we would take on a platform, and there was a platform. So an example would be there was a sponsorship platform recently that was set up. It was a community interest company. We paid the license fee, and then we said to clubs, here's a platform for you to put your information. So if you're looking for a sponsor to sponsor your next session or your next program, you might have an ambition to work with more women and girls, for example, you can put that on this platform, and a potential sponsor could then look at that and say, oh yeah, we're interested in that, make contact, and then hopefully get some sponsorship your way. The next thing that we're doing and active partnerships are doing is working in a far more community orientated way. So back in the day, when I first started in active partnerships and sports development, we basically worked with local clubs, and we worked with the people that were interested in those local clubs and taking part in those activities, and they came to where those activities were. The focus now is very much working in what we call them hotspots in Northamptonshire. Not everybody calls them that, but they're very targeted places with high social deprivation, multiple indices of deprivation. So, you know, there's more people in lower paid work or not in work at all. There's more people with disabilities. There's more older people. There's more people from ethnic minorities. So as an area, it's deemed to be an area that needs greater support and investment. So in Northamptonshire, we have 6 hotspots. Sport England, not in Northamptonshire, but Sport England runs some national pilots. So again, depending on where you are, you might have what's called a local delivery pilot, an LDP, and they have significant investment from Sport England to take activities to the communities that in the multiple indices of deprivation terms need it the most. So as I say, Northampton, we're working with 6 priority hotspots, and we have officers who then work in those hotspots, try to find community assets, both buildings and people, and upskill those people to deliver things locally. So, you know, gone are the days where we would go in and deliver activities and then clear off 3 weeks later and leave them to it. It's about upskilling the people that are on those estates to deliver those activities in those settings. And then I've touched on tackling inequalities. There is a fund out there to support that. It's now called the Together Fund. So just as an example, over the last sort of 18 months of the pandemic, Northamptonshire invested 124,000 into local communities. So you'll see a breakdown there. I won't dwell on that, but we've now got 2 unitary authorities. 40,000 went into the north, 80,000 went into the west, and they were the demographic breakdowns of how the money was distributed. And your active partnership will have done the same piece of work. This is where I lead. This is my area. So again, all active partnerships are different. We've probably got Somerset is also an example. They have a fairly big team in Somerset, but we're one of 3 or 4 that have a really significant team across the country. But there are others that do a lot of work in this area. So positive experience for children and young people. We try to make sure that all children and young people, not just the sporty ones, have a meaningful and positive experience of physical activity and sport. We do that through things like the School Games programme, which is an inclusive competition, festival and events-based programme. And we put lots of things on there that 5-10 years ago would have been just for the 10, 11, 12, 15 best sports people in that school. Now we try and engage, if there's 300 kids at Key Stage 2 in that school, we try and engage all 300. And we'll do things like fun runs with gradated differences in distances and ability, so that the kids who are less active don't feel as though they're competing against the really active ones and they're going to get thrashed. They go and enjoy it and take part without the competitive side, meaning they feel less valued. We provide advice and support to schools. So again, if you're doing work with schools, particularly primary schools, there is this thing called the PE in School Sport Premium, and every primary school in the country. This is England. I appreciate there are people from potentially the other home nations here, and they have roughly, depending on the size of the school, £18,000 a year ring fence for PE in school sport. So there are opportunities there to link in with primary schools, and they're always looking for new things that they can do, new clubs, new activities, how they might engage different sports, different groups, how they might provide some skills and training and support to their children and young people, especially if those sports aren't necessarily the mainstream sports that that kids have tried before. So, you know, something like, I'm sure it still exists, but correct me if I'm wrong, rookie lifeguarding might suit. You know, you might be able to run some kind of lifeguarding club if there are the facilities available and the coaches available to do so. Mention leadership and volunteering, a big thrust at both primary and secondary to increase the number of leaders and volunteers within schools. Training and CPD, we spend a lot of time providing support to both primary and secondary staff around their training needs and CPD needs. And we look to try and develop school club links. So we're still about, if we do something in school, we really want to engage the community and provide the exit route for those children and young people to move into a club. So another example, and we're just waiting for some further confirmation of funding on this, is there was a pot of money recently that Active Partnerships had called the Out of School Hours Community Use of Schools Fund, catchy name. But for us, it was about £160,000 of investment to try and get we used it for secondary schools, to try and get secondary schools to run after school clubs linked to local clubs. So we had coaches going in, delivering activities, training teachers, leaving behind equipment, resources, materials, so that the school could carry on delivering those activities to the young people, and then hopefully forge a link to move those young people into those club settings. Connections with health. So mention physical activity and not just about sport. Significant real kind of growth in this area of working with public health. So a lot of work around referral pathways, social prescribing, trying to get GPs now to recommend physical activity as a way of improving people's health rather than prescribing them a pill. So we do a lot of work to try and encourage providers such as gyms, sports clubs, to be on the radar of GPs, so that if a GP gets somebody who comes to them and it's suitable for them, they can be prescribed physical activity and exercise as a means of benefiting their health. We're doing a lot of work around support for older people, as are a lot of active partnerships. So there's a program called Otago, which is all about trying to make sure that older people are supported to have fewer slips, trips and falls. And if they do have slips, trips and falls, they're in a position to recover more quickly from those slips, trips and falls because they've gone through a program of exercise and they understand a little bit more about the value of physical activity and exercise. And then the last point on there is system change. We talk a lot in active partnership worlds around system change. We're about trying to make sure that the system, and that system is that massive beast, both in terms of what that might look like in Northamptonshire, but what that looks like across the country, how that system works together to really to offer more opportunities, integrated opportunities. You might remember, going back a few years, there used to be an advert on telly for Heineken, and it was all about, there was a group of people digging up a road, and as they're digging up the road, the people came along with the gas engineer comes along and says, "Oh, while you're digging up that road, can I put my pipes in there?" And next minute, the telecom guy turns up and says, "Oh, you're digging up the road, can I put my stuff in there?" And then the water people came along, and it's about trying to make as much impact as possible in a coordinated fashion. If you remember the advert, they drew the line when the Undertaker turned up and said, "Is it possible for me to put my my stuff in there?" Maybe you don't remember, but it's always something that resonates with me. And then finally, active environments. It's about how we can utilize the spaces that we have around us and how we can encourage more people to utilize those spaces. So it's a lot about influencing planning policy. That's as exciting as it sounds. It's about regeneration projects. So again, there's a project in Northampton at the moment called the Active Quarter. So there's a piece of derelict. It used to be an old golf course. We've prevented it from being taken over by developers for houses, and it's now it's going to be transformed into a bike park where people will be able to use the bike park free of charge. They can turn up down there and just go for a bike ride. And guiding infrastructure development. So again, back to massive house building going on, but not always joined up with how that translates into getting people physically active as part of what they do. So that's a big piece of work. A lot of what we do in Northants, again, is around open water. So from your point of view, we currently have 2 open water sessions start this week, actually, and we have RLSS trained lifeguards. We've got an RLSS lifeguarding course happening very soon. So we did one last year, had I think 12 people through it, 15 people through it. We've got another one happening soon with another 12 or 15 people on it, so that we can provide those sessions and that they're safe for the people that are taking part. I've got a quick document if it shows. Now this is where I might lose you. Has that changed picture?
No.
No. Okay.
That's
So
framework for physical activity.
Okay. That's a link to a document. So all active partnerships will have a strategic framework that guides their work and enables people then, you guys, for example, you can go and search that and you can find that and you can see what they're about. Because as I said, they are all nuanced, they will have slight differences, but they all will be striving to do the same thing. And that concludes my bit. I'm sorry if I rattled through it and said a lot, but questions if you have any.
You look stunned.
Sorry about that. Well, feel free to, if you want to ask me about your local partnerships, I have a working knowledge of some of them. The ones in the East Midlands better than the others in terms of my knowledge, not in terms of what they do. Although I would say the East Midlands ones are the best ones around because that's where we're from. But yeah, if you had any specific questions, even if it was just, what's my local one called and how do I get in touch with them?
I've just done a Google for my one in Kent, and I think it's Kent. Is it Kent Active Partnership?
Yeah.
I think something very original like that. So I guess they're all going to have those same sort of names, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean Kent's a historical thing. I don't know if the guy that I know is still there, but it used to be a county council sports team, and for a period they didn't want to be an active partnership, but in the end they became an active partnership. So there used to be a guy called Kevin Day was the lead guy down there. But Kent, yeah, they do good things down in Kent.
Sean said tell Ryan I said hi. Sean said tell Ryan I said hi.
I've been attacked by the cat.
I know. Mine's just been snoring at the side of me. But,
So music earlier on, cat now. Sorry. I'm fairly sure I've done some stuff with Kent. I registered, I think, with their website probably about 4 or 5 years ago, but I think it was one of those things that I couldn't really see anything that was benefiting us at the time. But since lockdown and the fact we've been all but kicked out of our pool and we've got no pool space now, and it's costing us a hell of a lot more, that's probably worth reviewing that connection and partnership arrangement to see what they can offer now for us.
Karen, anything else?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things is like all the active partnerships, they will have a club register where you get on and people can search for it. I think when I first started, lifesaving wasn't an activity that was on the drop down box. I think for some of them it is now, and because they've added it to it. There are two main makers of the active partnership websites, and one of them has done it. The other one, I think the other one now is you can do it as another and put in the name of the sport and activity. And the other thing I think again is that most active partnerships have a newsletter, which I think it's important that clubs are signed up for and get information there. You will get email. You will get probably 6 emails a year of a newsletter that has nothing in it that you are remotely interested in. But you know that one that arrives just at the right time, and it's got something in there that's really important, and that will make a real difference for you. So I think in terms of that, engaging with them is really useful. I also think that looking at Gary's presentation, you have to look at that and think, one, we are never going to satisfy everything in that, and that's not the point. Nobody will ever do that. But what lifesaving, I think lifesaving clubs will do, if you look at the possibility of increasing activity for people, if you look at the health benefits, if you look at the training benefits for young people, there are a number of areas within there that clubs can look at and say, well, actually, that's what we do. That's what we can deliver. That we can do that. And once people start working with their active partnerships, I've found that active partnerships are quite keen to come back to them and say, well, what about this scheme? How do you think this scheme might work for you? So yeah, they are a really useful partnership. And if nothing else, when Gary was talking about data, if you're making a bid for something, you know, getting in touch with local active partnership and saying, have you got any data about the participation? You know, they've got it. You know, so you just get in touch with them. They will help with funding bids as well. The majority of them. Some will have a named funding officer, or a club development officer, or somebody like that. Others, it's a bit harder to find who that person is.
I mean, they range. Active partnerships range, and some are small. You know, 4 or 5 staff covering a geographical area. Others are much bigger. I mean, London is obviously London and covers a huge footprint and has millions and millions of pounds of budget. I mean, we're one of the smaller partnerships in the country, but we've got 23 full-time equivalent staff. Now, a lot of that staffing is project-specific staffing. So I mentioned our school sport team. That's project-specific staffing across the country. A lot of those posts are hosted in schools, whereas we brought them into our organisation in 2011. So there are kind of differences in both budgets and size, but core things like club support, generally everybody's got club development, club welfare type people. Insight officers, as Lawrence mentioned, you know, if you're writing a funding bid and you need some insight, go to your insight officer, your active partnership, and they should be able to tell you not just your active lives data, but they should be able to give you a full demographic breakdown of all of your area that you're looking to target. They can talk to you about the different ethnic minority groups in there, how many kids are on free school meals in that area, you know, all depending on what it is that you're going to put in your funding application. And that obviously differs from what the funding is looking to try and achieve. But, you know, to back up Lawrence's point, generally speaking, the people in active partnerships are nice people. Their heart is in the right place. They don't do it for the millions of pounds that they get paid per year to do that. They get paid, but they're not earning vast sums of money. But they want to help clubs like you to do what you do, because many of them, like me, are you in a different hat. I mean, tomorrow night I'm the other side of the screen in a committee meeting, listening to the county FA tell us all about the wonders of their new affiliation fees that have gone up by 1,000% in the last 12 months because they haven't got the money that they once had. So, you know, we're all there for the right reasons and we all want to help you. I mentioned earlier I had a meeting with a basketball club. They want to do a women's project, and I spent 20 minutes trying to work out how I might take some funding that I've got. The criteria doesn't quite fit, but how I can manipulate the criteria to suit what they want to do so I can give them some money. And that's what we try and do within the boundaries of the law and all those kind of
things. Any questions? Anybody? Yeah, go on, John.
Okay, Lawrence, John Stainer, Sussex. Yes, we do have an active sports partnership in Sussex. My clubs were involved with them. Lifesaving wasn't initially on the agenda, on the schedules. It is now. They do organise safeguarding courses, but unfortunately we have to use the RLSS safeguarding course. So I only think about 2 people ever did it a few years ago. But anyway, that's another matter to consider. We do have to do safeguarding courses, but they must be RLSS ones.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there are 1 or 2 sports which are in the similar boat.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I think rugby.
Football's the same.
Yes, probably.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, obviously from Somerset, but the bit that we struggle with is that lifesaving is seen very much as a children's activity, and even the lifesaving programme, we do have the odd few people who do decide to do it as adults, and John's quite successful in getting some adults to, take lifesaving to a competitive, sort of like programme, as it were. But I think it is something that the RLSS needs to sort of like consider as well, as to how it can make lifesaving more inclusive for for the greater age range, rather than just all the time saying, oh, it's a children's activity. When you get to 16 you need the MPLQ and then you can go and work as a lifeguard and then we won't see you anymore. So that there does need to be a little bit more joined up from the RLSS with the aims of the partnerships. And yeah,
undoubtedly. Yeah, I think as far as the adult side of things, yes, I think if clubs, I would like to do some work with clubs and trying to get more adults involved in as participants rather than as volunteers and coaches and those sorts of things. Obviously, at the end of the day, the more adults you had involved as participants, the more volunteers and teachers and coaches you probably will get out of them. But I think, yeah, I think that's certainly an area that that needs developing, and I think within the active partnerships and smaller borough council sports developments and those sort of things, I think there would be a willingness to support that and look at how that would be made possible. The problem comes, as with most activities for lifesaving clubs, is actually access to pool time to enable that to even get off the ground, when I think a lot of clubs are just struggling to get any sort of, I guess adults perhaps maybe mainly slightly less reasonable pool times than the children at the moment, but it's going to be an issue.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I'm involved with two clubs. One is majority now are adults. We've got very, very few youngsters doing survive and save, less than a handful to be truthful. The other club is the other way around. There's about 30 kids there of an evening, a club night there, which are all doing survive and save, and very few seniors, adults.
I mean, just a question, John. Do the adults in the other club, the adults
competitive?
They're competitive.
As Liz knows me very well. Yes, very competitive. We have an 8-lane pool, and 6 lanes of that are squad members. There's a double lane pool there that very few in it.
But there isn't the but if we're going to go down, if you go down the competitive line with, then there's not the infrastructure within RLSS to support it, unfortunately.
I think we have to.
I know, obviously I worked with John in the past when we did the, we had a South Region squad, didn't we? Development squad.
Yes.
But the, unfortunately, things have. You just need to look at the National Speed Championships and look at the number of clubs that participate. It's a handful, 22 clubs of, however many clubs there are. So you do begin to wonder, we're looking at the minority rather than, the majority. And how can we, we as lifesaving clubs, the Survive and Save programme is very much, because it's, it says from age 12, it does give the impression that it is for children rather than for adults. And it's just a way of, we need to find a way of finding something that adults are interested in that aren't necessarily just going to be competitors.
Yeah, you have to have a competitive strand and a non-competitive strand.
Yes.
Not everybody's going to want to compete. And in fact, I'd probably say the majority are probably not going to want to compete. They're going to get involved hopefully for the health benefits for them, the fitness benefits, and then the fact that they're learning a useful skill that one day may help them in an emergency, should we say? But yeah, there's certainly an area that I think we needs looking at, but. And whilst I would love to do it, it's perhaps somebody above me who will be making those sort of decisions. Right. Any more questions?
Andy, can I ask you a question? Andy, you're Kent. Are you Gravesham or Sheerness?
I'm Gravesham.
Gravesham, I thought you were.
Yeah, we do stuff with Sheerness down at the beach there during the summer.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure what they're doing as club wise down there, because don't think Phil does anything to do with it anymore.
No, he doesn't.
And I don't think they've got much of a life-saving, if any, life-saving section. Yeah. I think they've still got the swimming club, haven't they? But life-saving, I think, has just fallen by the wayside.
Correct. Gravesham's quite active though, and Ian Smith used to be Gravesham, but I think he's more triathlons now.
Yeah, he was Rochester and us at some time.
That's right.
But yeah, he's doing a lot more of the triathlon stuff.
Yeah, hopefully.
We've never been competitive as a club.
No.
As soon as you mention anything to do with competition, everyone just disappears. they disappear to the bottom of the pool and you don't see them for the rest of the session.
That's right.
which is
That's right.
which is quite strange, you know. So we've always done it, as Lawrence was saying, you know, for the sort of health benefits and things like that.
Yes.
We've got a few adult members, we're predominantly children, but obviously, you know, if you don't have any adults, you've got no instructors.
That's right.
And it's that age-old problem that all clubs probably are having of trying to get that balance. But
yeah, well, we will have
separate
a
session.
South East region meeting coming up shortly, and that's on the agenda, sports and competitions, and I'm in contact with all, and we should be organising a few during the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if we'll actually be taking part as a club.
Well, you
or
may have some
league,
youngsters.
but,
There's some youngsters in there.
Okay, right.
But under 16s are events.
Yeah, but my lot just don't want to know. They mention
I know the
competition, they
feeling.
grab themselves.
You talk about an incident, a circus they call it now. Oh no! Oh, they go blank.
Yeah.
Right, gentlemen.
Yeah.
I think we'll draw it to a close for Gary. We can leave the meeting open for discussion, but
That's fine.
we're getting a little bit of.
Yeah,
We're
thank you, Gary.
digressing.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. It was appreciated.
Thank you very much, Gary, and hopefully we'll take something away from this, and it will help you in your endeavours in the future, guys. So,
Yes, thank you.
voilà, I
Thanks,
will
everyone.
stop recording, and no doubt I will see you all again soon.
Have we
Thank
got
you,
any
Gary,
more
and
of
thank
these
you,
planned,
Lawrence.
Lawrence?
Sorry?
Thank you.
Are there
I'll
any
leave you
more
to it.
planned?
Yeah. There's one.
There's one on
Utilising social
competition
media.
Oh, I didn't catch that, Liz.
There's one on competition sport, isn't there?
That's why I've blanked it out.
Competitions, and then there's utilising social media.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And we may have one on just a. I can't.
Those two you mentioned were the two that sprung to mind. But yeah, I think I'm busy for the competition one.
Come to the competition one, though.
I think I'm busy. I'll have to find out when it is. Can't remember.
The trouble is, though, you see that the biggest issue with competition sport, though, in all honesty, is the fact that there's a lot of people who don't understand it, and it doesn't need to be that you're an Olympic athlete or anything, because there's so much in it at a lower level.
Yeah.
And so, do you teach the Survive and Save Awards, Andy?
Yes. Yeah.
Or the Sport Awards?
We don't tend to do much of those at the moment, mainly because of pool space.
Yeah.
And so we did some before COVID, but now we're down to absolute minimum bare bones of where you can just about swim a length and that's your time up. We've really got to just home on the basics.
Yeah, it's a shame. Because I mean, these sessions are good, and I feel really sorry for these speakers that you get in there, Lawrence. The fact that so few people attend them.